Okay, so again, as usual, we try, when finding our limit, try first to plug it in, see what happens. If I plug in 16 into this one, I would get 4 minus 4 is 0 over 0, which is an indeterminate form. So now I have to do some more algebra to try to figure out what's going on. In this case, well, there are two approaches to this. I'm going to show you both, and then you can decide which one you prefer. Let's try the multiplying by the conjugate first. So I'm going to rewrite this. So I have limit as x approaches 16, a square root of x minus 4 over x minus 16. Okay, so this is a little algebra trick that you can use when you have situations like this, and this sort of trick works usually when you have square roots in your limit. So what you're going to do is you're going to multiply numerator and denominator by the conjugate of the numerator or the denominator, whichever one has the square root. So in this case, I'm going to multiply it by square root of x plus 4 because the square root is in the denominator. Okay, now you have to be careful in that you only want to FOIL with the terms that have the square root in them, and you'll see why in a minute. Okay, so take a look here. If I FOIL on the numerator, which is where I have the square root, this is actually a difference of squares, and what I would get is that this is equal to, on the top, x minus 16. Okay, now again, you don't want to distribute, and you'll probably see by now why we didn't want to distribute on the denominator, and it's because I can now divide the x minus 16 on top with the x minus 16 that was on the bottom. And if I do that, I can now plug in the 16, and so what I would get is on top I would be, remember you're left with a 1 on top, and on bottom square root of 16 is 4 plus 4 is 8. And so that's the limit. Okay, now another way to look at it, and this is quicker but you have to know what you're doing, is that if you take a look at x minus 16, now this isn't the usual way you would factor a difference of squares, but if you imagine it being a difference of squares, let's leave the top alone. If you factor it, this would be square root of x plus 4 and square root of x minus 4 by simply getting the square root of each one. And so notice that these two can cancel, and what you get is exactly the same thing that we got back here. If you plug in now 16 down here, you would get 1 over 8. And so it's really your choice. I personally prefer this method because I think it's clear. Although if you're quick and you recognize it as being of this type and that this would work, then this is a little bit faster. Okay, so in this problem, this is a complex fraction, and probably the best thing we can do after we plug it in is to simplify it. So let's say we plug in 0 for h. Notice that we would get a 1 over 4 minus 1 over 4. So we would basically get another indeterminate form, 0 over 0. Okay, so we simplify. To simplify, well, we have to combine the two fractions on top into one, and so we need to get a common denominator. So basically this one needs to be multiplied by a 4, and this one needs to be multiplied by an h plus 2 squared. Okay, so what we get is the limit as h approaches 0 of, I'll just put the h on the bottom. Now I'm going to have one fraction, and the denominator is going to be 4 times h plus 2 squared. And on top I would get 4 minus, now if I FOIL out the h plus 2 squared, I would get 4 minus h squared minus 4h minus 4. Okay, now I'm going to turn the denominator into a fraction. And I'm going to use, first of all, the 4's cancel. So notice that this 4 minus this 4 cancels them out. And if I use the law of the tortilla, I get that this is equal to the limit as h approaches 0 of minus h squared minus 4h and 4h times h plus 2 squared. And so basically what happened is I multiplied negative h squared minus 4h times 1, that goes on top, and then 4h plus 2 squared times h goes on the bottom. Okay, and so notice if I try plugging in 0, I would still get an indeterminate form, 0 over 0. So I still have more work to do. So notice that I can factor out an h on top here. So if I factor out an h, I would get negative, let's factor out a negative h. So then I would get an h minus, sorry, plus 4. You can factor out just an h, but it just looks a little cleaner. And on the bottom, I'll just leave it how it is. It's already in factored form. And notice that the h's now cancel. And if I plug in 0 now, I get, on the numerator I'm going to get, so don't forget the negative, so I'm going to be negative 4 over 0 plus 2 is 2, 2 squared is 4, times 4 is 16, or negative 1 over 4. And that's the answer.